Greetings, friends, and welcome to another Classic WoW Hunted video. I am your host, Zera, and today we'll be discussing a couple of weapons and a trinket. And the first thing I want to say is thank you guys so much for the continued support. You guys have been amazing in the stream at twitch.tv/saltyzera. Check me out there. Don't also forget to also check out the Discord link down below to join the True Shot Brigade. We just broke 3,000 members. It has been amazing to see everybody in there, theory crafting and getting together and making friends and creating an opportunity for us to come together and create the best community Classic WoW has ever seen. So let's just dive headfirst into what we have for you today. Alright, so the first thing I want to discuss is the potential for a weapon known as Larvae of the Great Worm. This is a gun that is going to be featured in Ahn'Qiraj 40. It's going to drop off of Oro. He's kind of a bonus optional boss that almost everybody is going to want to do, to insist to do, because he drops one of the most powerful DPS trinkets in the game, Jom Gabar. But he also happens to drop a nifty little weapon called Larvae of the Great Worm. Quite hideous weapon, I might add, but a weapon nonetheless. So a lot of people have been hitting me up with questions saying, hey, is this gun any good? Is it better than Azrathul? And I see it does more damage, so on and so forth. Well, let's actually take a deep dive in that. So the first thing I want you guys to notice is that I've got the DPS spreadsheet set up for a dwarf. We are 2031 build. We are set up to have max up time on exposed armor, or excuse me, Sunder armor, Curse of Recklessness, Fairy Fire, the whole 9 yards. And Rag has 336 remaining armor. More on that in a minute. And we're looking at about 796 DPS in total. And this is, of course, with full T2 and fully maxed out with enchants, and of course also your world buffs that you would typically get. This is a normal rotation, I might add. This is not melee weaving. This is going to be a set standard that we're going to test real quick. Now, if the dwarf, let's just get this out, if a dwarf cannot make a gun work, then it's safe to say that no race can make the gun work. And the reason for that is the fact that guns are racial for the dwarves. We can take advantage of that, get 6% hit, which means we could slap stay plus 7 weapon damage on the gun, as opposed to other people that would likely have to put business on it, which means that we would get more out of the weapon. Well, let's just take a gander and see what actually happens here when we do so. So remember, 796 DPS up front. So let's go ahead and swap out the weapons. We're going to go from Azrathul to Larvae of Great Worm. Now, of course, our damage is going to drop because, you know, we just swapped out a more powerful weapon, and we do plus 7 and 789. We don't even break 790. So again, you go from what we had before with 796 DPS to 789.6. So this is a little over 6 DPS drop off. And I've done various different testings. It doesn't really matter if you're wearing full T1, full T2, or if you're wearing full rank 10, rank 12 gear. At the end of the day, Azrathul is a superior weapon to Larvae of the Great Worm. But let's take it a bit further and find out why that is. So here's Azrathul in the flesh. This is everything you need to know about Azrathul. It's got 124 damage floor, it's got 186 damage ceiling, 3.4 second attack speed, plus 36 range attack power. Now, if we go over to Larvae of the Great Worm, you'll notice that it has a 1% chance to crit and 18 attack power. That's actually a little bit better. That's actually really, really good. However, also notice its damage ceiling at 192. Well, 192 is better than 186, so what's going on here? The attack speed is 3 seconds. 3 seconds is a little too fast for us. It's not horrible. It's actually better than Rockdalar, but still just a little too fast. We're going to be clipping quite a bit. Where Larvae really loses ground is going to be on the low end of its damage. Notice that its low end damage is 103 damage. Azrathul has a damage floor of 124. So Larvae has a much larger spread of damage. In point of fact, when you actually factor in the spread between Azrathul and Larvae, you're going to see that Larvae is going to do less damage than Azrathul about 23.6% of the time. Azrathul covers almost 70% of the spread that Larvae does. So Azrathul is going to start at your low end of 124, work up to 186. That's 69.7% of the Larvae's damage spread, but Larvae has a 23.6% chance to do less damage than Aznithal. So you factor that in with the fact that it is a faster weapon, you're going to clip more often. Even with things like extra crit, it's still not going to benefit you in the long run because you end up hitting the low end of the damage too frequently. About 1/4 of the time your shots are going to do less damage than they do if you just stuck with Aznithal, not to mention Aznithal you will not clip. So at the end of the day, Larvae is a good weapon. It is not a great weapon. If you end up getting into Ahn'Qiraj 40 and you are a hunter and you have not been lucky enough or been blessed enough to receive Aznithal yet, this is a fine option for you. It is better than Rocktalar. It is better than other options such as Blaster Shot Launcher. But from a PvE perspective, Aznithal is going to be your best in slot weapon until Phase 6. On Phase 6, however, I took the liberty to do a little bit of research ahead, and I know a lot of trolls were probably looking forward to using Soul String, which is a bow that drops off of the 4 Horsemen encounter. Brace yourselves, fellas, because I got some bit of bad news. Soul String is in the same boat Larvae is, and when I mean the same boat, I mean the exact same boat. Soul String has the same exact damage spread as Larvae does, 103 to 192, and it has actually got less attack power than Larvae does, and it is actually even faster than Larvae. Trolls, even with using Soul String, you're still not going to benefit, and I will demonstrate this real quickly. Let's just go ahead and say that you're a troll, and you have access to everything here. We're going to go ahead and put on your crossbow of smiting. We're going to give you plus 3% hit. Now you're 76.4 DPS. Let's go ahead and transfer over to Phase 6. And let's just go ahead and say that everything stayed the exact same. We went ahead and took your Soul String and slapped it on. We'd go from 76.4 to 746.2. Now we'll even slap on Scope, and we'll see what it even drops, 752.1. So 752.1 by comparison to 766.4. So this is an even greater fall off for the troll with Soul String versus Aznithal than it was for a dwarf with Larvae. Mainly, again, this comes back to the speed, because the more you clip, what means the less damage you will potentially be putting out. So at the end of the day, your best option is going to be to stick with Aznithal. It is going to be your best option. It'll offer you the most damage. It's unfortunate, I understand. I know a lot of hunters were probably looking forward to maybe having something a little different, maybe flexing their muscles or maybe spreading their wings out a little bit. But Aznithal is going to be our best in slot weapon until we get that elusive Nerubian crossbow off of Kel'Thuzad at the end of Naxxramas. Alright, the last thing I want to look at real quick, and this is going to be kind of quick, short and sweet, I promise. Badge of Swarmguard. So this is got a lot of question marks surrounding it, because a lot of people think that this is going to have absolutely no value. And I've heard some people, some big classic WoW content creators, talk about this as if it's not really going to have any place in a boss fight. I can't say for certain that it's going to be the absolute best option. I can't say that the rotation we've discovered that Skin A presented and what I showed off in last week's video is going to be outdone by this. But I think that having Badge of Swarmguard alongside of something like Jom'Gabar or Earthstrike will be on par, if not slightly better than something like Charm with Earthstrike or Charm with Jom'Gabar. So let's actually take a look at Annihilator, because this is the key point here that I want to make. This is a 600 armor reduction, stacks up to 3 times, and it's a main hand weapon, mostly wielded by people like an off-tank. Now, for Badges of Swarmguard, this is where the rubber meets the road and whether or not this is going to be a worthless trinket or not. Obviously, this is an armor penetration trinket. It stacks up to 6 times, up to 1200 armor. It's a buff on yourself, not a debuff on the boss, so that needs to be pointed out as well. It also does not share a cooldown with any DPS trinket. So for hunters, the ability to combine this with something else like Earthstrike or Jom'Gabar does give it some appeal. The only downside is that if your raid is already using Annihilator, up to this point, every raid encounter we've seen, the most amount of armor that we have seen is 3,731. And the bosses that have that armor, and they are exactly Onyxia, Magmadar, Gar, Baron, Ragnaros, and all 8 bosses at a Blackwing Lair all have this same armor count. Which means that if you only account for 5 stacks of Sunder Armor, Fairy Fire, and Curse of Recklessness, this only negates about 3,395 armor, which leaves you 336 armor count left. And if I can actually show you this real quick, this is what I pointed out earlier. Ragnaros now has a remaining armor count of 336 armor with 100% uptime on Sunders, Curse of Recklessness, and Fairy Fire. Notice there is no uptime on Annihilator because we're assuming that no one is using Annihilator. And now notice the damage reduction for physical damage is 5.76%. So again, Badge of Swarmguard is going to have some value. 5.76% damage is going to be the most that anyone has to look forward to in our current content. Of course, this trinket doesn't come out until Phase 5, and while the PTR was just recently released for Ahn'Qiraj, until those numbers are made official and we're actually able to get our hands on that data to do some number crunching, which I'm sure will be soon, so this will have an updated video in the future. Let's just assume that everything in AQ40 and Nax has the same armor count as everything else in Blackwing Lair does, with maybe a little bit of flexibility, much like Molten Core, because there are bosses like Lucifron, Gehennas, and Shazra that have far less than 3,365 armor, which means that Badge of Swarmguard and even things like Annihilator are completely worthless. They're not necessary. So you just gotta play with it, play with the numbers, think ahead, know ahead what encounters are going to have, what bosses are going to have what armor count, and we're just going to have to see what value this is going to hold. I believe that Badge of Swarmguard is going to be great for hunters, especially when it comes to trash, because being able to pop this on, get a couple of stacks, and then throw out a multi-shot with 1,200 armor penetration is going to be phenomenal for us. It's going to be amazing. It's just unfortunate that until we actually have the final numbers on what the bosses in the later game content's going to have, armor-wise, we won't know how much value this will hold in later content. However, I would venture to guess that right now, Badge of Swarmguard will have value. It's just a question of how much value it is going to have. If your guild, if your raid team is running with Annihilator all the time, then no, Badge of Swarmguard will have no value for you. And it's unfortunate, I know. You can use it, of course, on trash pools, like I said, but in a raid boss encounter, it will not hold any value for you. Now, if your guild is not utilizing Annihilator, and I know a lot of guilds that are not, then you will have an opportunity to take this trinket and get the most out of it. The only question is, do we use this alongside Jom Gabar, or do we let, Jom Gabar go off, and then we use our charm, and then we fiend death out to things like Royal Seal and Black Inch Breath. So again, we won't know until we get there. It's something we're gonna have to test in the future, and I'm looking forward to it. But I just wanted to mention it here as an opportunity. I wanted to point out things like the remaining armor count, the damage reduction left on a boss, and give you the actual physical numbers for each raid boss encounter. Again, the bosses that would have value for Badge of Swarmguard currently, so long as you're not using Annihilator, are Onyxia, Magmadar, Gar, Baron, Golemag, Ragnaros, and all 8 bosses from Blackwing Lair. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Give it a thumbs up if you did. Comment down below. Join the Discord. If you've got any questions, that's probably the best place to get a hold of me. Ping me at Zera, and I will get in touch with you and answer any questions you might have. Love you guys as always, and I look forward to seeing you in tomorrow's Blackwing Lair raid. I'm Zera, and I'm signing out. So long, everybody.